Number 1. Escapee. I am submitting this story anonymously, and I won't use any real names because of the details of the story, but this is absolutely true. It was absolutely the most terrifying thing I had ever had happen to me. This is cliché, but it was a dark and stormy night. I was staying with my cousin's family for a few weeks. They lived far out in the country. Both of his parents worked late second shift jobs, and they wouldn't be home until very, very late. We had some of the windows open in the house because it was summertime, and the rain and wind were helping to cool down the house. The two of us were watching television. I can't really remember what it even was that we were watching. What I do remember is hearing the beeping noise for the emergency broadcast system, and the announcement was that a man had escaped from the local prison. He had been convicted of a home invasion and the attack and murder of 2 members of that family. The warning told us that he had to be considered extremely dangerous and to lock up your home. If you've never seen an escaped convict warning before, they are absolutely terrifying. And the worst part was that the prison was not that far from where we were. And with that storm raging outside, he was likely looking for shelter if he hadn't already found it. He had gotten out much earlier in the day, and I guess there were previous warnings when we weren't watching TV. My cousin and I decided we needed to go and make sure all of the doors and windows were locked. He took care of the rooms upstairs, while I took care of the ones downstairs. I tell you though, the moment I was alone down there, I was absolutely freaked out. Every step I took, every noise I heard, every flash of thunder just made me jump. I kept thinking that someone was going to jump out and grab me. Suddenly, my cousin came running down the stairs. He started yelling at me, saying that he saw a man in the backyard, and asked me to make sure everything was locked up. It made me jump, but honestly, I thought he was just messing with me. I told him as much, but told him I was just going to check the back door. My cousin insisted. He even said he was going to call the police while I went to check out the back door. When I got to the door, I noticed that the doorknob was locked, but the bolt was unlocked. I felt better and went to turn the bolt. I swear, right when I touched the bolt, a bright flash of lightning lit up the entire yard. And at that moment, which although was just a split second, it seemed like it was forever, I saw that my cousin was not lying. There was someone in our backyard, and he was trying to get into the tool shed. I quickly did the bolt, and then I jumped back from the door and ran into the living room. My cousin was on the phone with the police, and he let them know that we were not sure if the guy in the yard was the escaped convict or not, but at the very least he was trespassing. My cousin told them that my uncle had a few guns, and that we'd have to go get one for our protection, because it might be a while before the police arrived. My uncle's room was in the back of the second floor, so I went upstairs, we got the gun out of the closet and loaded it. While my cousin was doing that, I went over to the window to keep an eye on the man. It was hard to see, except when lightning was flashing, but when it did, I noticed that the door to the shed was open. I didn't see the man, but assumed he was in the shed. It was scarier not knowing where the guy was, though. It took 30 minutes for the police to arrive, since we were so far out in the country. Every second of that 30 minutes was a terror that I've never felt since. Every time the lightning flashed, I expected to see him coming from the tool shed with a chainsaw or something. I really didn't know what was out there. But the police did arrive. They searched the yard and the surrounding area. He wasn't in the yard, but they did ask my cousin about the contents of the tool shed. There were some missing items, including a machete, so they assumed the convict was now armed. They did pick the guy up within a couple of hours. He did not have the machete on him, but the police did believe he was the man who was in the backyard, and that us calling them made it easier for them to find him. It was a really good feeling too, but it was also so scary that I'd never want to experience anything like it again. Number 2. The Ride. I really like thunderstorms a lot, which I know is a common thing. There is something about the dark clouds and the wind and lightning that just makes me feel alive for some reason. But I only really like them when I am at home or somewhere else sheltered. I hate getting caught in the rain. I mean, I really actually hate being wet. I take showers out of necessity, but the experience is generally unpleasant for me. On this day, I had left the house earlier in the daytime. The sky was really clear, and it was very warm outside. We live a little out in the country, and I thought I'd take a nice walk down to the main road to go to the store. It was quite the hike, actually, but it was so nice outside that I didn't mind the walk. It was still nice when I made it to the store, although I did feel the wind pick up just a little bit. I bought a few items. Honestly, I can't remember what they were, and then left the store. I was maybe in the store for about 15 minutes, and it was completely changed once I got back outside. Dark, ominous clouds were quickly moving in. I began to get worried that it was going to begin storming before I could get home. I didn't get too bent out of shape, though, until the bolt of lightning and boom of thunder made me jump. It was going to take me a good 90 minutes to walk all the way home, and it was obvious that I was going to get wet before it happened. When it began to sprinkle, I just prepared myself for the unpleasantness. The road off the main road that led to my house was dirt and gravel, and it was going to be a pain to walk through. However, before the rain really began to pick up, a pickup truck pulled up behind me. The driver asked me if I needed a ride home. I was very thankful for the ride and hopped in the cab. The man who picked me up was sort of creepy, but that didn't matter much to me at first. I was just happy to have been picked up. But as we drove on, I realized I couldn't wait to get home so I'd be away from him. He asked me a whole lot of questions, like if I knew where a good place to meet women was. I was 16 at the time, so I told him I really only met girls at school. He then began asking me if I had any sisters, which I told him I did, and nearly immediately wished that I hadn't. He then began asking me all sorts of questions about my sisters, and I hesitated to tell him anything. I mean, he was probably in his 50s, and it seemed like he was interested in my teenage sisters. When we got to the house, I was eager to get out of the truck, so I thanked the man for the ride. He asked me if any of my sisters were home, and I told him no one was home but me. Finally, I got away from him and into the house, locking the door behind me. At this point, the storm was fully raging. After I made sure that the house was secure, with all the windows closed, I came back to the front door. I was surprised that the pickup truck was sitting in the same spot that it had been when I had gotten out of it. The front lights were on, and the windshield wipers going, but he made no attempt to leave. I went back and locked the door because I was seriously beginning to get creeped out by this guy. He stayed in the driveway for about 10 minutes before finally pulling away and disappeared into the storm. Now I was alone in the house because my family had gone to see relatives. They wouldn't be back until the following evening. I just decided to go into my room, turn the lights out, and just enjoy the storm while I messed around on my computer. The storm continued all day. It was really intense, too. Later that night, I went into the living room for the first time since I had left the living room earlier, and I was surprised to see the pickup truck was back and sitting right where it had been before he drove away. The light from a bolt of lightning revealed that no one was in the cab either. I felt really jittery and nervous all of a sudden. It was bad enough when the man was hanging out in his truck in my driveway. But not knowing where he was really got my anxiety raised. I went and grabbed a hockey stick for protection. It was the only thing close to a weapon that I had. I went downstairs and turned on the lights in the living room. While I was looking around, I heard a breaking noise coming from the back of the house. I ran into the back room and turned the lights on. A back window had been broken, and the man was in the process of trying to climb into the house. When he saw me, when I turned on the light, he paused. I then ran at him with a hockey stick, striking him on the wrist. He called out and fell out the window. Next thing I knew, he was up and running away from the house. I heard the truck start and made it back into the living room in time to see him drive off. Even though he was gone, I was still very uncomfortable. I had a broken window and had a guy try to break into my house, and I was just uncomfortable. I slept horribly that night after I patched up the window with a garbage bag. He didn't come back, and I didn't see him. Number 3. The shelter. The worst experience I have ever had happened when I was a teenager. I was out playing basketball at a local park. I had the whole place to myself, which was very cool. It was a really cloudy and slightly cool day. It was supposed to storm later in the afternoon, so no one else was out really. I was having such a good time that I was still playing when the storm clouds had overtaken the sky, and it got very, very dark outside. It was maybe 2 in the afternoon, and it looked like it was night. The lightning was the only thing that really brought any light to the area. I tried to play as long as I could, but eventually I realized that I was going to have to go home, or I was going to get caught in this vicious storm. As I mentioned, I held out until the last possible moment, and that ended up being way too long. No sooner than I stepped off the basketball court, and the whole area was illuminated by an amazing flash of lightning, and before going dark a split second later, the rain began to fall. I wasn't too worried about getting a little wet, so in the beginning, I wasn't in too much of a hurry to get home. However, it didn't take long before the wind and the rain picked up to what began to seem dangerous. I realized that I needed to find some sort of shelter. I had, by that point, made my way halfway across the park area and was walking by the baseball diamond. There were 2 dugouts that would do a relatively decent job at keeping me safe from the elements. I mean, I wasn't really warm, and I definitely was not dry, but I did feel much better than I would have out in the storm. I was surprised at how nasty the storm was, and it didn't really appear to be slowing down at all. I was beginning to think that it might be a long time before I actually get out and got home. And then suddenly, it stopped raining. Because it really didn't even slow down, it just stopped. And the wind calmed down a bit too, but not totally. I cautiously came out of the dugout and looked around. It was still windy, but there was absolutely no rain. And then I heard it. I heard a loud, rumbling noise. It definitely was not thunder, and I looked in the direction it was coming from, and was shocked to see a tornado had touched down, and it was coming towards the park. Now, this is something that I never thought would happen to me, but I always had dreams that it would. I didn't know what to do. There was no place for me to run to. I figured the only thing I could do was go back to the dugout, which was mostly underground. So I ran back in. The bench was built into the concrete, so I figured it was something I could hold on to. I waited, and the rumbling noise just got louder and louder. A big part of me wanted to get up and look out to see it, but the practical part of me kept me from doing that. And all I could do was wait and listen to that noise. And then it happened again. The roof of the dugout ripped off, making the absolute worst noise I had ever heard in my entire life. And I was under the bench holding on to it. Every moment, I expected to be sucked up into the tornado. I expected to die at any moment. I don't know how much time passed, but the rumbling finally went away. I was soaked, hurting, and scared, but I was alive. I wasn't actually in the direct path of the tornado, but it appeared the other dugout had been. It had completely been destroyed. It was a scary experience, but nothing was scarier than realizing that I might have not survived if I'd picked the other dugout. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. I wanted to apologize for the length of time between videos. I haven't been feeling my best the past week, and the debacle I had with my last video, I had to render it 6 times before I got a working version of it, was pretty frustrating. But the feedback about the video has been great, and I appreciate that very much. Everything is good, I just needed to recover a little bit. So if you're not subscribed, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the little bell so you'll be notified of all the new videos. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. Leave me a comment to let me know what you thought, and consider sharing this with someone you think might enjoy it. And please, whatever you do, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a killer orange cat might be hiding. Good night.